So welcome everyone. My name is Charmaine Campbell-Patton and I will be your host for today's webinar. We are looking at Blue Marble perspectives on intergenerational evaluation for transformation. And this is part of Youth in Evaluation Week, which is an inclusive and intergenerational gathering of the global evaluation community that's focused on strengthening the voice, learning, and prosperity of young evaluators. So today we are going to begin our time together with a prayer from our colleague and Global Advisory Council member, Dr. Nicole Bowman, followed by a land acknowledgement from Andrea Lisa Belzer. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Nikki.
Walamasi ni Dushinzi Wichu New Kanewak Nino and GIE, Shannon, Wisconsin. Hi, good morning. Crack-a-low. That means what's cracking, what's happening. That's the fancy way to say hello and good morning. I'm in Wisconsin on the homelands of the ancestral homelands, I should say, of the Menominee Nation in the Great Lakes. And on Kukana'aki, we call North America Turtle Island. And the lakes are the heart of Turtle Island. And so I am warmly and passionately and lovingly here as we celebrate Earth Day, not only on the calendar, but every day. Good morning to y'all. I will start by giving a prayer for the things around us, within us, and things seen and unseen, human and not human, but still relatives in my language, which is the Lenape language. I am from the Stockbridge Munsee. I'm a citizen and a traditional member trying to live in this contemporary society using traditional ways of knowing, being, and doing. And good morning to all the new faces and all the ones that I know. It's beautiful to be here on this sunny day. Anishik ki shalamokwe elamiliang yon kwai kishqueak walk Mitch walkin wala Melissa walkin walk nialagomati walk ni wikian walk elamiliang Kukana'aki, that means Mother Earth, walk Hishoch, our sun, walk Nipahum, our moon, walk along Gwewak is our stars, thanking for the stars, walk Papatakwik, our thunder beings, Anishik ki shalamokwe, thank you, Creator, elamiliang, for giving us Tindao walk Mbi, our fire and our water, a Sinal walk hash hung, that means our stones and our wind. We also call our stones our grandpas because we use them in sweat lodge and for ceremonies. Mitwak walk Papa Walashik, which are trees and our flowers that are budding and bringing life back to us. Mihuskwil walk Wichapikil, the grasses and our medicines. Awaya Yasuk walk Awala Shoshuk, our animals and our birds. Namasak walk Akoksak, our fish and our insects. Kohamina, Kamahomsina, Kukana, Kohana, Ninjosuk, Nichanina, Kachosamina. That means our grandfathers, our grandmothers, our mothers, our fathers, our friends is Kachosamina. Nichanina is our children, and anyone who is female, it could mean mother, auntie, grandma. It's Nguka. Our root words all say mother. That word guk is in Kukana'aki, so that's our earth mother, just sort of giving you a linguistic familial or relational connection there. And then I want to say Lapi Anishik Kishalamokwe Ni Mubausa Wakanam Anishik. That's the biggest thanks to the Creator for giving me everything in my whole life that is from the past and now, and that will be given to me in the present. And I've learned from my First Nations relatives, when you hear something good, they go like this. I said, it's almost like you're smudging with that good energy. They're like, oh, yes. But if you go like this, it means frustration. And every finger is a middle finger. So make sure you do it the right way. Good morning, relatives.
Thank you so much for being with us, Nikki. Really grateful to have you. And over to Andrea Lisa.
Thank you so much. I'm holding some medicine that I've been gathering with Nikki and with some other relatives. And I've brought my favorite grandfather rock here. It reminds me of the yin and the yang principle from Blue Marble. I'd like to welcome us all to reflect on how we are indigenous to Earth, to this blue marble. And in the land acknowledgement, I'm acknowledging that I am living in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq First Nation, that I am a treaty person under peace and friendship, and that in my personal and my professional endeavors, I strive to live up to peace and friendship and rebalancing, decolonization, liberation, for the upliftment of all. And I just invite you to reflect with me on your own origin story, as Nikki teaches us, your own genes. Where were your ancestors displaced from? Where were your ancestors indigenous to? What soil and what plants and what air, what non-human relatives helped your ancestors become? And now, as our bodies continually regenerate ourselves, we are in this local global situation where literally the molecules we're made of come from all over the world because we're ingesting, we're breathing, we're drinking chemicals and nourishment from all over the world. So in that way, we are super connected in our material being. We're super connected in our intellectual exchanges. And in terms of the intergenerational theme, where we've come from and what we're contributing to as we bioregionally and globally rethink balance for life, is this is my way of thinking this morning about honoring the land, the soil, the air, the non-human relatives and human relatives that I'm sharing this local space with, and that I'm sharing this morning, this global space with you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrea Lisa, for that local land acknowledgement. And if you haven't yet and would like to share where you're joining from and your name in the chat, you are welcome to do so now. As I said, my name is Charmaine Campbell-Patton, and we're going to do some introductions of our speakers as we go throughout the webinar today. But I wanted to introduce myself in the same spirit by just telling you a few things about myself. So I am a Zennial, which means I was born at the cusp of the Gen X and the Millennial generations. I'm a second generation evaluator. Michael is my father, and my mother was also an evaluator. I have been doing evaluation professionally for about 15 years. I really, because my parents were evaluators, I consider myself a lifelong evaluator. I'm an American with Irish, Scottish, and English heritage, and I'm joining from my home here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is Dakota land and Anishinaabe territory. And the type of evaluation I do is primarily developmental evaluation and capacity building for organizations and networks working to support transformation towards a more equitable and sustainable world. I'm really happy to be your host for today's webinar. I'm looking forward to introducing you to all the others joining us, but I also want to get to know you as well. So I have a very short Mentimeter poll. The link is right here, and I'm going to share my screen. And I would just love to find out a little bit about who's joined us today. So my first question is, in what decade were you born? And if you're having trouble using the Mentimeter, you can put it in the chat if that's easier for you. Just to get a sense of the range that we have joining us today. Got 70s, 80s, and 90s so far. One from the 50s. Give it a few minutes. 50s on chat as well. Great, so pretty centered in the Gen X to millennial, but we've got a few baby boomers in there as well. And my son is here with us today, and he was born in 2017, so we can count him as well. Let's move to the next question is,
Is there supposed to be
Charmaine
sound?
got kicked off, so she just
Oh.
texted me that she got kicked off, so let me pick up and she'll rejoin us when she can. So I don't have the agenda in front of me anymore. Am I next to introduce Blue Marble?
Yes, but I also believe there is another question on the Mentimeter. It's how long have you been doing evaluation professionally? I don't
We'll
know
have
if you
to,
want-
we'll come back to that. Because she would have to control that from,
Yes, then it's the
Sure.
overview of Blue Marble.
right. All right. So the vagaries and traumas of the internet. I'm Michael Patton, Charmaine's father, and I'm going to, as an elder, do a little bit of history to ground us in the Blue Marble piece of this. So, as Charmaine noted, she's a second generation evaluator, and we know now that there are at least 10 second generation evaluators, folks who've grown up with one or more parents as evaluators. Charmaine and I collaborated on the new 5th edition of utilization focused evaluation. And a part of intergenerational evaluation is the grandchildren, which are a part of how we started thinking about intergenerational evaluator in our own engagement with evaluation. I'm going to do a little history to ground us in how we got to this point. In 2015, the year of transition between the Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals, Eval Partners was born, and 2015 was the International Year of Evaluation, as declared by the United Nations. And in that year, there was a great deal of work strengthening national evaluation capacities. We have over 200 voluntary regional and national evaluation associations around the world, and I was involved in much of that training. And in the course of that work, it also became clear that many of our problems transcend national borders, that global problems can't be dealt with either by single agencies or by nation states. And that as more initiatives were beginning to be global, that we also needed evaluators who could think globally. Issues like climate change, economic turbulence, international refugees, virulent infectious diseases like the pandemic, dying oceans, global cyber terrorism, international drug cartels, human and weapons trafficking, poverty and inequality, multinational corporate collusion, world hunger, and other things constitute what's now being called a polycrisis, an interconnected, mutually reinforcing set of crises that aren't going away anytime soon, and it require global kinds of initiatives, which means we need global ways of doing evaluation. And that's what gave rise to Blue Marble evaluation. It's a reference to the picture of the Earth as a whole taken by the last Apollo mission in 1972, showing the Earth without boundaries, without borders, our home, our one home for all of us. And as Einstein famously said, we cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them, which was national and agency forms of engaging with the world in silos. And so systems transformation, being propelled especially by the younger generation, becomes an evaluation issue. How do we evaluate systems transformation in global systems? And Blue Marble evaluation then takes that perspective and invites all of us to think about, at whatever level you're operating in projects and programs, what are the global trends that affect what you're doing? This is, in Blue Marble, what we call the global principle. Combining the term global with local, we get the word glocal, which is to look at the intersection of local and global phenomena, how what's happening globally affects things locally, and how what's going on locally informs what's happening globally. So the Blue Marble evaluators zoom out for the big picture and zoom in for whatever immediate context we're working with. And that then gives rise to intergenerational evaluation, of being able to combine the perspectives of people across generations that bring different histories, different perspectives on things. It's interesting for me to see the reemergence of the conflict now between the West and Russia. That's the conflict that I grew up with in what was called the Cold War. I was doing a webinar, actually a face-to-face seminar a couple of years ago, and I made reference to the Cold War, and mostly with a younger group of people, and I could see from their faces they weren't quite sure what that was. And I said, do you people know what the Cold War was? And somebody said, is that a Minnesota, Canada thing? And I said, no, it's actually a Russia and the West thing. And so I was what was called a Sputnik baby. We came in right after the Soviets launched the first satellite into space and created the space race, which led to the part of the Cold War. These intergenerational understandings bring our history into understanding how we end up where we are at any given time. So being able to think long-term, medium-term, short-term, and appreciate the different perspectives that come across generations. That what we're doing then at any moment is both drawing upon our history, understanding the present, and looking ahead to future generations. Blue Marble evaluation then is about crossing silos, crossing boundaries, crossing borders, whether they be national borders to think globally, agency borders to think across issues in the polycrisis, to think across disciplines, to think across territories, to think across backgrounds, and to think across ages. And in doing so, part of the perspective we bring is that we all have skin in the game, that the future of humanity is at stake, and that we care about the Earth. We care about our future, we care about future generations, and that brings us then to a Blue Marble evaluation perspective. And our focus today on intergenerational evaluation. I hope my slides were sharing during all that.
They weren't, but you speak for yourself. I mean, no slides needed.
I'm sorry about that.
I'm sorry, I didn't know you had slides, or I would have said something, but I was gone for the beginning, so sorry about that, folks. We got it all though, and it sets us up well for what's next. So thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for receiving without me. So that gives us a great framing for what Blue Marble evaluation is and how we've come to this Youth and Evaluation Week with this intergenerational evaluation perspective. The wonderful speakers that we brought together for this were the first time we came together as a group was for some work on the Food System Summit. And Michael was doing work on the Food System Summit about 2 years ago. There were a series of independent dialogues that he and a team were synthesizing. And they identified the importance of going really deep into certain perspectives, including Indigenous peoples, women, smallholder farmers, and youth. And so some of the folks that we brought together to do some of those deep dives, to talk to the folks who convened dialogues around those different issues, it was an intergenerational, international group that included some of our speakers today. And so when we saw this call, this is a link to some of the background information and the reports that came out of those deep dives. When we saw the call from the Youth Evaluation Week from Eval Youth, I thought about this group and I thought it might be nice to reconvene us and to reflect a little bit on that experience of working intergenerationally on that project, and more broadly to think about what we can learn for intergenerational evaluation from our Blue Marble experiences. And so I'm really excited to have our speakers with us, and I'm gonna introduce them as we go through. We have Michael talked about a number of the different Blue Marble principles. We have 3 that we're going to focus on today. And we are going to start with the global principle. And so I'm going to share just one slide that shows you the global principle. And the global principle calls us to integrate interconnections across levels. And so we wanted to consider, how can intergenerational evaluation support an exploration of how people, information, and resources flow from local to global and global to local? And we are going to hear from Mutisma Mukuti and Andrea-Lisa Belzer about that. So Mutisma was born in 1966. He, like me, is kind of on the cusp between the Boomer and the Gen X generations. And his evaluation work started in 1998. He's been working as a consultant since 2005. He is born and still lives in Zimbabwe, and his evaluation approach is formative interventionist research and accountability and learning-oriented evaluations in and at the interface of sustainable agriculture and food systems, biodiversity conservation, natural resources management, climate change, gender equality, and community development. And Andrea-Lisa Belzer is a Generation Xer and has practiced health and social services evaluation since 1995 in Canada and internationally. A first-generation Canadian, she is joining today from her home in Nova Scotia, Canada, and she embraces evaluative practice that facilitates social and ecological thrivability. So I will turn it over to Mutiswa and Andrea-Lisa to help us talk about this global principle.
Thank you very much, Charmaine, for the introduction, and good day, ladies and gentlemen. I'm excited and grateful to be here with you. As Charmaine has said, Andrea-Lisa and I are going to talk about how intergenerational evaluation can support how people, information, and resources flow from local to global and vice versa. Our position is that inclusive multi-generational evaluation is dependent on these kinds of flows. It does so by building the evaluation field and body of knowledge, and by integrating the perspectives, experiences, and energies of different generations at and across different scales. This way, evaluation benefits from hindsight of previous and older generations. It also benefits from insights from younger and older generations, the current ones, and produces evaluation wisdom for future generations. Charmaine referred to the work that we did in relation to the 2021 United Nations Food System Summit. I would like to quote a statement that was made by the Global Indigenous Youth Forum in support of intergenerational learning. They said, the exchange between youth and elders and intergenerational cooperation is key and crucial for the future of our way of life. The youth have access to modern education compared to elders, so we want to merge the modern and the traditional ways. To illustrate how this inclusive intergenerational cooperation can be enacted, I draw on the experiences of an international transdisciplinary research program on transformations to sustainability, which had a strong focus on intergenerational learning. The 3 projects that made up the 6-year program were co-led by researchers from both the Global South and the Global North. The co-leads, researchers and co-researchers, were from both academic and non-academic institutions. Each project research team consisted of early, mid, and advanced career researchers. I participated as a mid-career researcher and later as a consultant responsible for drawing research program design insights of such international transformations to sustainability programs. The program was designed to generate engaged, solution-oriented knowledge, very similar to the kind of work that we do, that enables a broader and deeper understanding of the conditions, processes, outcomes, and impacts of transformative social change in the context of sustainability and justice challenges. Intergenerational learning was intentionally designed to happen through learning by doing, on the one hand, via facilitating workshops, co-generating research products, a program-level early career research network, joint program reflection workshops, and sharing research findings. And on the other end, it was also designed to happen through kind of formal program-level training for early career researchers. Both capacity building approaches tapped into indigenous and disciplinary knowledge developed over generations, as well as on older and younger generation researchers and practitioners' knowledges. The insights from the Transformation to Sustainability program suggest that inclusive, systems-oriented intergenerational evaluation can be useful for a number of things. And here I share with you 6. They can be useful for building communities of practice that consist of younger and older evaluators operating at local, regional, and international levels. And also for developing evaluators' cognitive and affective capacities. This would include agency, covering different generations, professions, places, and levels of operation. They can also be ensuring generational, social, and geographical inclusion, and co-learning and trust building across generations that taps into two-way mentoring. Also, fourth, enabling the cognition and valuing of local and cultural knowledge without appropriating it. Fifth, supporting mobility and influence of a broader range of evaluators and their respective perspectives. And finally, catalyzing transformational learning and change. Michael Patton has kindly proposed some inclusive intergenerational learning principles that resonate with the program's insights. These are, and there are 4 of them, honor the experiences and wisdom of elders, while at the same time taking seriously the perspectives of new and emergent evaluators. 2, bring knowledge of the history of evaluation into the present, both the historical strengths and weaknesses, as well as contentious and continuous issues as foundation for the future. 3rd, spotlight and appreciate intergenerational evaluation in kinship as an expression of continuity in general, and as well as family level continuity and commitment. And lastly, support and nurture intergenerational interactions and mutual learning. To conclude my short talk, I would like to highlight the potential implications of these insights and principles on evaluation practice. The implications are that it is important to include the perspectives and knowledge of the marginalized evaluators and communities. And secondly, encourage the concerned organizations and communities to be influenced by co-generated intergenerational evaluation knowledge produced in the context of cognitive justice. Let me welcome my fellow presenter, Andrew Lisa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. In the interest of time, I encouraged Mutitsla to take most of the talk time because of the richness and the beautiful way that he has synthesized learnings from his international experience. And what I'd like to do is just reiterate how astonishing it is to me over and over again that while I work in a very local way with very small communities, and participating in Blue Marble evaluation allows me to have access to these broader learnings from around the world. And what is astonishing to me is how resonant the messages from communities around the world are with the messages that I'm being taught by the local communities who I work with, the First Nations here in Atlantic Canada. And so the importance of revitalizing and honoring traditional teachings as part of emerging alternatives that are sometimes super high tech with energy sovereignty and so on, in a way that doesn't culturally appropriate and in a way that really honors and respects different ways of knowing, is something that we're hearing in the decolonization of philanthropy and the decolonization of development with South-South collaboration, for example. And we're also seeing it locally with communities working together for upliftment and liberation from within. And I just wanted to reiterate that wherever you're working, in whatever context, however small, however broad, we all have gifts to bring, and we can all be part of learning, unlearning, relearning. We all have expertise, and we all have things to where we're beginners, no matter how seasoned we are. And that's one of the things I love about this intergenerational principle in the Blue Marble case, is that there's some people on this call who are absolute legends, absolute founders of the field. And there are others who are brand new. And there are some who have substantial academic training and some who have perhaps no formal academic training. And I would almost include myself in that category because I haven't been to school since 1994. But we're all welcome, and we're all exchanging and learning and unlearning together. And that's so important. That's so important with having a beginner's mind, and also having the courage to show up and share what you do know. So thank you so much for allowing me to participate today, and I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Mutitsla and Andrea Lisa, for helping illuminate the global principle in such beautiful ways, and really bringing your expertise. I suppose you're both sort of our Gen Xers on this panel, but so many other perspectives to this. So thank you. We are going to take questions at the end of all of our speakers, but please, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat now, and I will start to, track them so that you don't lose your thought, but we won't actually turn to them until after, because now we are going to turn to our next principle, which is the cross silos principle. And Unfortunately, one of our speakers was not able to be here today, but we do have one of our wonderful speakers, and I'll also introduce our others. So Sergerik Yakudyam was born in 1976, and his evaluation adventure started in 2002. And he has been working as evaluation expert and visiting professor in Africa, Asia, America, Europe, and the Middle East. As a credentialed evaluator with 20 years experience, he's known as a world-class evaluation leader with broad experience in leading research and evaluation, including Indigenous matters. And you can read his full bio in the link that I shared earlier. Karuna Gupta was not able to join us today due to a personal emergency, so we wish her all the best. And she is a longtime member of our Blue Marble evaluation community, and so we'll be sure that she has a chance to share her thoughts with you at another time. For now, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sergerik.
Thank you so much, Charmaine. Maybe let me try to see whether you can see my screen. I don't know why, but okay, I don't know if you can see it. I always like, as I learned from my bachelor degrees, that what you see, you retain very easily. So that's why I always like to use PowerPoint or anything to share with colleagues. I'm so glad to be part of this team, and then also to share my 2 cents into not only about the cross-silo principle, but among other principles in evaluation, but also learn from colleagues. At the end, I get some questions. So I want to take you about silo principle, and then to share firstly from the Blue Marble perspectives, and also from my own perspective, because of I've been so maybe fortunate to work in so many type of field, in the world. So the issue, I should say, is to present, how, we are talking about intergenerational evaluation. It means, I can remember the first question about, with multimeters, we see different people from the 50s, 60s. I don't know if you have someone from 40s, but at least we have youngest one from 2017. I mean, your son is, is another evaluators coming in the field. So how can all this group of people can connect and work together, into a challenging world? This is what we're going to see. Like the SDG, we all know that to be able to provide a sustainable or make impact into the world we want to see, most of the interventions at the EDG or, connects across sectors. You cannot see any intervention in the world without 2 or 3 sectors combining. Like when you want to tackle sustainability, you have to deal with education, health, environment, climate change. We are seeing every day. And then all those sectors are really interconnected. But from Blue Marble perspectives, it's good to look about some premise. The first premise about the problems, we all know that if you are dealing with, let's say, complexity in evaluation or interventions, problems are also interconnected. So all of them, they are lined up together, and then you cannot take problem one by one, depending to the way you are doing the works. But by tackling the problem without changing the system, this is the most challenging for many organizations. How can you just look about the problem first, but without touching the system who made it? But sometimes you have to do the both. But it's good to get a good start where you want to do it, the works. And it means, sometimes you can decide to tackle one side or partially, to provide a solution which might be likely to solve the issue you have on board. Very importantly. The second premise is about, we all know that problems are often intertwined. It means the interconnections between the problem, and across the system require that system change strategy. This is where, some organizations might bring in revision of their strategy for doing only for the design of the intervention, but also how they have to work together, both internally and also externally. Externally means with the partners, how to connect, collaborate, and get partners on board to solve the same issue or the same views. So solving problem, but we all have to acknowledge that by solving problem piecemealing, lead to also having piecemeal solutions. And then sometimes it's very challenging, and it cannot help depending to where you are doing the thought. But there are some proposal, let's say implications, by to involve post-silo principle in evaluations. Firstly, we have to acknowledge that projects and programs are based on linear, let's say, logics. Today we are talking about theory of change. So it means we get all this into one basket and then we make a line up about what our asset, and then look about what might be the bargaining power we have to solve the problem, the problems. So it means it simply means that by looking about causality within the interventions, we have the ability, to bring in some kind of feasible solutions. So we have to acknowledge that in this view, by doing system changing, it's different from implementing projects. It's not the same. Evaluation system change is different from evaluating projects and programs. This is very important. For example, last year I was involved into a UNDAP evaluation, knowing what we're known like collaborative framework evaluation. You have intervention with 6 programs, and then we have about 24 players. When I talk player, I mean like agencies. So when you are doing UNDAP evaluation, you have to face, for example, multiple agencies in the same country, trying to solve the same solutions. They're working together. So how can, at the country levels, the agency, under the UN coordinations, can bring in feasible solutions who match, firstly, the interest of the country and also the interest of the partners supporting, the country to overcome the target solutions. System consists of interdependent elements. We know that, and then they're interconnected in such a way that a change in one element can connect with other elements. It means if you bring in kind of a proposal to solve issue into the system, you should be sure that you're going to have implication in other part of the system. Very important. And then by tracking those change for evaluation purposes, it requires that we have to bring in a feasible method on board, a way to capture change in the system to make sure that at least we provide a feasible proposal, to overcome, the target problems. What does it mean? Today we see in many evaluations, we bring in different kind of methods. Some might say that if you are dealing with kind of maybe regional interventions, by bringing in, let's say, mixed method evaluations might help a lot to combine both, household concern and also programs concern. Government at the government level is very important. And then in another way, we have to acknowledge that supporting system thinking apply to a situational analysis. It means it involves, let's say, a rough and very intensive and inclusive design. And then it also have to look about how stakeholders are engaged, what we all call like stakeholder analysis, to see the level of engagement, the implication, and then also look about how is it feasible to implement the intervention we want to solve. How do we adapt about the context where we are going to do we want to implement the intervention, also like to lead to evaluations. And then maybe not the least, to see how can we apply a physical analysis to be able to solve the issue in face of us. So by saying this, let's look about how as a team, sometimes it's having implications. I call it cross-silo design and evaluations. So what is the importance? The first question we want to ask ourselves is, the importance is because in the cross-silo design, it had to tackle multiple issues at once. I likely require a maybe team for them to work together. Then it's very rare today now you see it in evaluation, you see only one single maybe leader doing evaluation without involving other partners or participants. It could be national evaluators, it could be field assistants, it could be any other team you may bring into the board. How does it work? Someone said to be able to have evidence, to be able to have evidence to support decision making on board, it's good to have key data, key information. But how do we generate key information? The one way to do that is to have very feasible question on board. If you ask the right question to people, you have the right answer. For example, You have to look about the center and in what way and an initiative working across silo in both the process and the result. You all have to question the two box, the processes and also the result. Most often, organizations try to don't look about the end box, which is a result. Like a manager might say, oh, now I need to submit my report to the donor. Give me the result of the interventions. But they don't look about the processes, what happened within the length of the implementation phase, where there are many ways to learn to see either what works best and then what doesn't work and why. And another question is like, it was good to question the interactions across the sectors, issue, indicators, problems, and how do they intersect for mutually reinforced system change. And then one way to see this, like we ought to tackle both the anticipated and unanticipated interactions. Why? Because when we miss one of them, we may go to the wrong way and then take bad decision. Let me say, I will never to quote bad decisions. But if we do both, you include a chance to have right decision on both. So when working as a team, as I said before, and there was a bit of between my slides, sorry about that. I want to share here some experience when working as a team into evaluation and then some step. Why is it good to have a team in evaluations? The objective is to achieve an innovation. The organization needs to get people working together across boundary in evaluations. You see, in the Blue Method, we said we need a team in multidisciplinary team. It means people, if you are dealing with SDG programs, even that evaluations, you have education on board, you have heads, you have environment. So you need people who are specialized in those domains and have experience in order to come together and provide a feasible evaluation on board. Why? You know, I believe that by breaking down silo, it helps people to collaborate across boundaries, as I said. You know, they struggle to, for example, to make it happen when you're working alone. But by being as a team in the same project, in same evaluations, you increase the chance and the probability, you know, to achieve, you know, and to have to perform into that evaluations. We know that vast majority of innovation opportunity lie to the interface between functions. Within an intervention and evaluation, you have different functions on board who have to come together in order to provide, you know, to provide kind of living environment to work in. For example, into an intervention, you have a project implementers, you have governments, you have donors, you have partners, you have collaborators. In the same way, we have beneficiaries at the bottom line. So how can those people playing different functions that work together and it help a lot into the evaluations? But to do so, we need to develop and deploy cultural borders. You know, today we are talking about Ukraine war. We're talking about crisis coming in Sudan. We're talking about maybe the past war in Yemen. But what does it mean? It means like people in the cultural setting might learn how to work together. You know, you have to keep your own way of believing when you are doing the teams, but also now embrace with the team spirit. Sometimes cultural belief and context help a lot the team to achieve better, let's say, best evaluation. Sorry, I don't know why my eyes is cloudy, but and then cultural brokers promote cross-boundary works in one to two ways. For example, acting as a bridge, but also as adhesive. Very important. Sometimes we forgot this part when working in the cultural setting environments. We have to think about elders. When I talk about cultural brokers, who are they? They are elders, they are community leaders, they are religious people where people believe it. Community people believe about those people. They have the key role and they have influential support into the communities. And then this is very important. Maybe finally, not the least, I don't need the last one. Very importantly, so my message is that we as a Blue teams or evaluators, we should encourage people to ask the right question when doing evaluations. We should get people to see the world through other eyes, see it differently, and then you are sure that you might bring some added value, or you can make a difference into the evaluations. So these are my two pieces I want to share with you when talking about cross-silo principle in evaluations. So let me we get more time to discuss during the Q&A and section or by email. So over to you, Charmaine. I hope it helped a lot.
Thank you so much. That was so rich, and I really appreciate you taking this on the whole principle into Runa's absence. Really captured the essence of it and really contributed a lot to our thinking. If you have questions for Sergerique, please go ahead and put them in the chat. And we'll move on to our third principle, which is the yin yang principle. And so with this principle, we're looking at harmonizing conceptual opposites and asking how can intergenerational evaluation contribute to an expanded, how can intergenerational evaluation support us to seek out and engage with different perspectives, integrate divisions, transcend boundaries, and overcome polarities? Sorry, my son is trying to get my attention. So we have a wonderful speaker, Ms. Gabrielle Renteria Flores, with us today. She is a first-generation evaluator and millennial working in evaluation for less than 5 years. She works as a consultant across sectors and issues. She was born and brought up in a small town in Mexico and joins from Mexico City. And she believes in the transformative power of evaluation and the inclusion of young and emerging evaluators in the evaluative process and intergenerational solidarity. Over to you, Gabriela.
Thanks a lot, Charmaine, and thanks a lot to the other previous speakers. It's been really interesting to listen to your perspectives. And I will tell you a little bit more about the yin yang, or I'll be touching up on this principle. As we know, and as Charmaine mentioned, this principle is actually trying to harmonize the conceptual opposites. And in the spirit of the Blue Marble evaluation, in this holistic and transformative approach to evaluation that aims to address global challenges by integrating multiple perspectives, values, and knowledge system, I believe intergenerational evaluation can support us to seek out and engage with different perspectives, integrate visions, transcend boundaries, and overcome polarities by providing a space for a meaningful dialogue and exchange between people of different backgrounds, ages, cultures, etc., and actually fostering a deeper understanding of the complex issues we're living and facing. In particular, the yin yang principle, which emphasizes the balance and the independence of the opposites, can also be applied into intergenerational evaluation by recognizing the diversity of perspectives and knowledge systems, and by promoting the integration of multiple perspectives and approaches. Let's say a more balanced and nuanced understanding of issues being evaluated. The yin-yang principle implies the recognition of the other opposite. And for me, that's actually an invitation to recognize and acknowledge ourselves in the eyes of the others, but also to recognize ourselves in our own path. And actually, I really like the quote in the Blue Marble Evaluation book about the yin-yang principle, that it says that at birth, a person is flexible and floating. At death, a person becomes rigid and blocked. Whatever is flexible and flowing will tend to grow, and whatever is rigid and blocked will atrophy and die. And it is also a recognition of ourselves, of our paths, and how we can be ourselves, our own opposites, when we were rigid and more youthful and energetic, and when we started growing and kind of becoming more rigid. And in this principle, I believe that it's also, as Andrelisa mentioned, it is a call to learn, unlearn, and relearn, and to see each other from the eyes of the opposites. But also in this context, intergenerational evaluation can help us to address polarities and divisions by promoting empathy, collaboration, and dialogue, by creating a safe space for individuals to share their own perspectives and experiences, and by encouraging active listening and respectful communication, a more inclusive communication. Intergenerational evaluation can support us to seek out and engage with different perspectives, integrate their visions. And in this sense, I want to come back to the question, how can intergenerational evaluation support us to seek out and engage with different perspectives, transcend boundaries, and overcome polarities? If you have any ideas, I would like to invite you to put them on the chat. I'm gonna give a few examples what I think how it can be, so how can intergenerational evaluation and this perspective can support us. First, and I think the most obvious, is integrating diverse perspectives. Blue Marble evaluation recognizes actually the importance of integrating diverse perspectives into evaluation processes, very actively and very purposefully. And in this sense, intergenerational evaluation can support us by bringing together people from different backgrounds, and this can help to create a more comprehensive and nuanced understanding of the issues. But also another point is promoting transformative learning. Intergenerational evaluation can support transformative learning by encouraging individuals to challenge their own biases and assumptions and to learn from each other's perspectives and experiences. Again, this learning, unlearning, and relearning processes. Another element is by embracing complexity. As Blue Marble evaluation recognizes the world is complex and interconnected, and that solutions to global challenge require a more holistic and integrated approach. Actually, intergenerational evaluation can support this by acknowledging the diversity of perspectives and knowledge in really promoting collaboration and dialogue across boundaries. How this collaboration can be established between, like, in this complex environment, but by different perspectives. Another point is by addressing power dynamics. Intergenerational evaluation can support to addressing the power dynamics by providing a space for individuals to share their perspectives and experiences, and by promoting a more equitable and inclusive approach to evaluation. And in this case, I particularly believe the dialogues Charmaine mentioned are a great example, because by giving specific voice to women, to indigenous, to smallholders, to youth, they're addressing these power dynamics, recognizing the different perspectives and their own experiences. And also by creating opportunities for dialogue and promoting active listening. It involves fully focusing on what the other person is saying, acknowledging their understanding and responding appropriately. By actively listening to each other, people can build trust and create a safe space for open dialogue. And again, these dialogues were a great space because they encourage promoting active listening and created opportunities for dialogue. And finally, I'll mention the other thing is fostering empathy. Intergenerational evaluation can foster empathy by encouraging individuals to put themselves in each other's shoes and considering things from different perspectives. This can help to break down barriers and create a more inclusive and understanding environment. And in this, I think I mentioned it before in another space, but I would like to ask if you are a more experienced evaluator to put yourselves in your own shoes when you were starting your career. Who actually provided and gave you the first opportunity? Who introduced you to the evaluation environment? And now I would like to invite you to be that person. And yeah, just be that person for someone else. Be that person that allows and that welcomes a young and emerging evaluator into evaluation. And well, actually, finally, my last point is intergenerational evaluation can challenge assumption by encouraging individuals to question their own beliefs and biases. This will help to break down stereotypes and create a more open-minded and inclusive environment. Overall, I think intergenerational evaluation can support us to seek out and engage with different perspectives, integrate division, transcend boundaries, and overcome polarities by creating a safe space, fostering empathy and collaboration. And here, I think the most important challenge of the yin-yang principle in our harmonizing the opposites is finding a common cause. And in evaluation, I think we can find a common cause. We can find that social justice and environmental justice and intergenerational solidarity can be our common cause. So this is just an invitation. If you have any more ideas or any other comments and thoughts, I welcome them. And thanks a lot for the opportunity to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Gabriela. I love that call to find a common cause, find the empathy and interconnections among us. So really, really appreciate all of the perspectives that were offered with all of our wonderful speakers. And I am going to invite Michael to come back on and share a little bit more about his thinking of tying these together with the principles that were alluded to, but kind of more formally share them if you'd like to at this point.
Okay. So you heard Methuselah talk about the principles, and in the work that we've been doing with looking across connections around these, we have been discussing slightly different version. They're still in draft from some of the wording that Methuselah used. But the first was to seek out and honor the experiences, perspective, and wisdom of all ages, elders and youth. Bring knowledge of the history of evaluation into the present, both historical strengths and weaknesses, and continuous and contentious issues as the foundation for the future. So intergenerational evaluation is both personal and professional in that we look at and know about our history, our present, and think about our future intergenerationally as evaluators. A third is to support and nurture intergenerational interactions and mutual learning, which is what Gabriella was just talking about, becoming a mentor and taking on that role. To frame intergenerational cultural inclusion, 7 generations back and 7 generations forward. This is the Native American, First Nation, and many indigenous cultures' view of not just within a narrow time frame of looking 1 to 2 to 3 generations, but looking at our longer generational origins that Andrea Lisa talked about at the very beginning, where we come from and where we're going, to take this longer view. And finally, to understand, appreciate, and incorporate understandings from observing intergenerational dynamics in nature, the intergenerational and interdependent evolution of flora and fauna. That we not just be human-centric, but that we look at the nature of intergenerational nature. There's marvelous cutting-edge research emerging about the life of trees, intergenerational, about the life, the nature of water and land and our particles, as Andrea Lisa talked about. And so to bring into our understandings of what intergenerational means, the evolution of our larger natural world as well as of the human world, and to see that these are connected in this new era called the Anthropocene, where humans and nature are interconnected. And so our history into our present becomes very, very important. One of my most significant experiences as a young man was visiting Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania, where the early human fossils have been found, and to think about in that environment, the emergence of all humans from Eastern Africa that have spread throughout the world, and how we're all interconnected intergenerationally over more than 2 million years back to those origins. So just as the blue marble gives us a sense of our shared home, our shared origins as humans gives us a sense of what it means to be interconnected together intergenerationally. And so we welcome your thoughts about how to express intergenerational principles, how you might apply them, and as we continue working on this. This is material that's not in the Blue Marble evaluation book, but is itself an example of how that perspective is evolving.
Yeah, and if you have comments about the principles as they evolve, you can share them in the chat or by email. I'll share an email you can send your comments to as well. So thank you. We had one question to kick us off that I saw in the chat. This was for Sejarik. Would you detail, please, what are the differences you see between bridges and adhesives in systemic terms? I am a fan of bridges.
Thank you so much. Myself also, I've been famous of bridges, but also for adhesive. You know, I want to place it in the context of community. When you are leading or dealing with an intervention or an evaluation within the communities, within our interventions, bridges are, we have implementing, we also call implementing partners. We have those who are tied to the communities. We have neighborhood communities. We have all those players who play in the role, let's say, in the intermediary between community recipients and where the intervention is coming from. We can call them as a bridges because, you know, they are kind of linked between the community and then their supporters. But within the community itself, talking on the engineer's perspective, we have what we call adhesive leaders, which are the religious, which are community leader, because those leaders have been there forever. They are attached to those people. They are interconnected with those people. They are collaborating with those people for a while and then forever. It means those leaders or those community leaders, it could be religious, as I said, they have strong history, strong attachment with their people. Then we can say that, so we can call them as an adhesive. You know, there is a difference between the bridges. Bridges, you know, are the one they connect you, but they're not attached to you. They might not share the same interest with you. They may have different perspective, different motive or motivations, which are different from those adhesive leaders who are sharing the same interest, the same connections. I don't know if this simple definition or simple clarification, Sabina, but of course we have different way to see bridges and adhesive on the literatures and in the wall, depending to which context you are placing, you know, you are interested in.
Thank you so much. And there's a follow-up, is school or education and adhesive also?
Exactly. It
Yeah.
depends. I just take an example case study. It could be a community, it could be at the school level, it could be at the health center level. It depends, it varies. But in any of these sectors, because we're talking about connection across sectors, not only also about across domain, across livelihood environments, you might see where you can apply the two let's say a keyword. Oh, happy.
you.
I think she also confirmed. Thank you, Sabrina.
Thank you. Other questions folks have? Feel free to come off mute if you'd like, or put them in the chat. And as we wait, I am curious, one of the things that came up, we had a community gathering. We have third Thursday Blue Marble Evaluation community gatherings. We had one last Thursday, and so we used that as an opportunity to kind of preview some of the things people were thinking about in a more informal setting around intergenerational evaluation. And one of the things that Taruna Gupta, who was there, isn't here today, had mentioned was that there's research that older generation evaluators and generally older generation do not learn from young people, that they, even if there's sort of this stated like we'd like to, if there's a lot of tokenism that happens in these spaces, and wondering, regardless of where you sit, with Gabriella's call to put yourself in the shoes of, you know, the other, how can we facilitate learning across generations in situations where, you know, elders may feel they know better, or, you know, want to say that they're learning but aren't really learning, or if young people who sort of see older people as outdated and don't really want to, you know, think about that. Are there things that you've experienced in your life or in your work where that you've been able to get past that barrier? Anyone who would like to share? Yes, there's Sharika.
Yeah, I think when listening to that question, the 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 best thing coming to my mind was my last experience with the sexual common ground. You know, I was so fortunate to be a mentor for sexual common grounds programs worldwide because they were covering Asia and Africa. So they called me to be as a mentor for two students, and then the student was working and based in Switzerland. And then she was doing like it was during the COVID times, 2020, 2021. And then we went together into a teams. So the student was expecting that me as maybe seasoned expert would just give her a solution about what she was to learn for her study. And then surprisingly, as asked her to just share what is her interest into the mentorship programs. Then we get to one-to-one discussion on the Zoom. And then I said, the best way I believe, like, just share your interest. And then she said, but Eric, I don't know how. I don't know anything about evaluation. I'm in what we call it, let's say, junior or let's say blind in evaluation. I said, I know, but at least you have some, motive. You have some maybe expectation on what you want to learn. Just put it down, whatever they want you to put it, just put it. And then like what you want to achieve, the timeline, interest, feel, put it in any way. And then she did it. During our second discussions, and then I just put in my input. I say, okay, this is what you prepare. This is what my input I push it in. Can you see whether it fits into the fourth step? Sexual common ground, we look at us to do it. She said, yes, but I'm sure. I said, okay, how do you want the process to go through the fourth step we agree? And then she was maybe it's really said by doing this approach, she was leading the collaborations till the end of the 6 months, because that was a 6 months mentorship with the Sexual Common Ground. Today, she's working with the ILO in the Philippines. Just 2 years after, because the process was very keen enough, and then she was the leader. At the end, I asked her, so who is the leader now? I will see me anymore as maybe I don't know what the question was like. Others leading evaluation, you have a know-how, but of course, with this process, she was becoming at the end like, I'm the one who drive the process. I said, you see, you drive the process to the end. So if you adopt this kind of approach to leave our junior colleagues, youth, emerging evaluators, coming in with their solutions, and then I think some time ahead, so this is one approach I'm sharing with you. And then it helped a lot with that colleagues. Today we are colleagues because when I went to Manila last year, she was the one I knew coming to the office and then do evaluations with ILO. So I don't know, this example can help in a way that me, for my own thinking, there are so many ways I use, but I don't want to share this example with you. I have so many.
Thank you. Other examples of when you've overcome barriers to intergenerational learning? Folks want to share? I see a comment, the essence of humility is missing quite a lot lately, and I would agree, humility is a key competency. When we talk about competencies, I know that language can be problematic when we think about being a Blue Marble evaluator. Humility is a huge one.
I would add that a part of the way that we talk about learning often, young learning from older, older learning from young, focuses a lot upon substance, that the elders are telling young people something, or young people are telling elders something. But what we've learned as evaluators is that learning's about listening, the spending time hearing each other's perspectives. It's not having so much a learning agenda that you ought to know this, but that we need to hear each other, and that when we have forums and places where we can engage together, the main kind of learnings I think that emerge are less about concrete substance. Then what emerges in listening is actually more about shared experiences, picking up on Sir Eric's adhesives and bridges at a human level. bridges in the interpersonal realm are more like the cognitive things that we think about and connect together. Adhesives are our emotions. They're the things that bind us together. And that the thing that emerges most often, I find, when there's an opportunity to have extended discussions, whether it's Charmaine and I, with my other children and grandchildren, but with other younger evaluators, is how much we have in common, how we're facing similar challenges. I project a certain amount of confidence and experience. And one of the things I get asked about, have you ever faced situations where you didn't know what to do and run into resistance? Well, I still do that, and I've done that throughout. But the sharing of the emotional experiences of being an evaluator, as well as the cognitive things, is a different way of connecting intergenerationally than thinking that we have some kind of knowledge that has to get passed back and forth. It's sharing our human experience, and that takes time. That's what we're missing, is the time and the forums to actually hear each other and make those connections around shared experiences, where we find, well, yes, there are differences across the generations, but as humans, there's a lot of commonality. And that's a big part of what the Blue Marble perspective is about. We have cultural differences, we have geographic differences, but there's some essential human things that combine us, that help us overcome those differences. And that's a form of learning itself, intergenerationally.
Thank you. In the podcast, Gladys Rowe does Indigenous Evaluation Insight. She had an episode with Carolyn Fern, and Carolyn talked about thinking about the difference between knowledge and wisdom, is that wisdom is sort of knowledge with lived experience. And I think we often think of that as something only elders can have, but young people have lived experience, maybe the less of it, but some in different contexts, right? And so it's thinking about wisdom, can also be some of that more less concrete, like factual knowledge, and more of that lived experience and sharing the values, I think, intergenerationally. Gabriela, Andrea-Lisa Mutizo, would you like to add anything to the conversation?
Well, the Canadian Evaluation Society, for their credentialing program, requires a certain number of continuing education hours, and experienced evaluators who mentor actually can apply that to their professional development hours, in recognition that there is meta learning and that there is co-learning and co-mentoring that happens in a mentoring relationship. And I also have a First Nation colleague who works with youth, children and youth. She calls them her teachers. And there are some pedagogical traditions, and including pedagogy of the oppressed, that Michael references in pedagogy of evaluation and facilitating evaluation, that that establishes that a facilitator role is someone who is there to learn as well, and to really, I see that so much also in your work, Charmaine, that someone else mentioned the humility, to be focused on the assets and the wisdom that is already in a place, and then to bring whatever skills and support you can offer with your toolkit, but knowing that you're cultivating something that you actually don't bring. Is I just wanted to acknowledge that it might not be universal, it might be far from universal, but it's also something that is well established and recognized, that we can sort of draw on and amplify and cultivate in how we think about learning.
Thank you. I love that the co-learning is built into the CES model as well. Gabriela.
Yes, I will share one experience in particular where I actually think it was this co-learning process very well established, and it was actually working on an evaluation. But the main one of the initial meetings was just acknowledging and kind of agreeing that everyone in the team was there to be like an equal part of it. So there was like this recognition of the individual capacities of the other, regardless, I don't know, like ages, etc. But we would say like we recognize each other's backgrounds, ages, etc., and experiences. And I think just like kind of establishing that it was like an open environment and really having the humility to like, you know, open up spaces and dialogues was really important in that case, because I've also experienced the other side where like sometimes it is not recognized the role of another person or their experience or their backgrounds, and it was like more hierarchical and linear, and it really creates a lot of barriers for communication. I will just agree that with the comment in the chat about humility, but also being open to other perspectives, and that could help to this process. And actually, it also came in our dialogues that this intergenerational learning, it was not just to recognize that, yeah, maybe the younger generations bring technological change, and that was their thing, but really engaging into that, into learning, and just be open to that. And that the younger generations were eager to learn from what it has been done and the experiences and the real life experiences of the others.
Thank you. Mutiso, do you want to add a final word before we close up?
Yeah, one thing that we talked about in the synthesis of the research program lessons that I talked about earlier was positionality of the researcher, and I think this also is an important consideration. How do we position ourselves in relation to others? And this could be in relation to those that we mentor, those that we evaluate with, and those that for whom we do these services. So that question seems to be quite central to what we are discussing. But I wanted to give an example about on humility. When I met Andrew Lisa to discuss preparations for our presentation, she introduced herself. And the question that I asked her was, why are you so humble? And she had talked a lot about what she could not bring, what she didn't know. And that was very striking. So I think that this is just to reinforce the point about humility, and I think it's very important in this kind of work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Michael, final closing words, and then I have one more Mentimeter for folks that I'm going to put in the chat as you are talking as well for takeaways.
Very, very quickly. We've been talking interpersonally and institutionally and professionally, but I think from a Blue Marble perspective, one of the things that we're going to be facing in the future between the global North and the global South, where we're trying to transcend many of those colonial differences, is that the global South is predominantly demographically a young population, and the global North is increasingly an old population. The demographics between the global North and the global South are fundamentally going in different directions. And that's going to be a part of the larger issues that we face as the global North is dealing with how to handle unprecedented large numbers of elderly people over the ages of 70, 80, and 90. And the global South is dealing with the unprecedentedly large number of people under the age of 25. Those demographics are going to drive much of the relationship of the future around all the issues we face.
Absolutely. Well, I invite you, if you'd like, to go back to Mentimeter and provide your takeaways from today's session as we close out. I also want to give a few calls to action here. Want to invite you to join the Blue Marble Evaluation Network if you're not already. Here's the link. Also want to call your attention to, we have, as I said, third Thursday community gatherings. Those are on the website. Welcome you to join. And then the other Eval for Action Youth and Evaluation Week events. The website is in the chat. You can see those as well. Be sure to check out some of the other events happening this week. And really grateful for everyone who has been here and been part of this conversation. Read a few of the takeaways. I appreciate the many different efforts already ongoing to make this type of work a reality. It's motivating and provides places to learn. Relearning, understanding, and be the learner source for youth and the learner ourselves. Encourage people to ask the right questions, get people to see the world through others' eyes, listen across generations. Thank you so much. So many more great takeaways. And we look forward to continuing this conversation with you all as we go forward this week and beyond. And I'm going to put the email for Blue Marble Evaluation in the chat in case you have comments or questions about the principles and want to continue this conversation. Thank you all of our speakers for being here. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Charmaine, maybe we can get a good photo.
Say that
Maybe
again?
Everyone can open his camera and then we take a photo for this section.
Oh yeah, sure. Let's do it. Let's do a photo.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah, please,
get-
colleagues, don't leave. Open your camera and then Charmaine will take
everyone
it.
open your camera if
Please.
you would, and we'll take a group photo. In just 1 minute, I'll give folks a moment.
Mhm. I see friends
Okay.
never see for about the past 4 or 5 years now with the COVID.
Oh,
Vivian, Lawrence. Oh,
okay, ready? 3, 2, 1. Say, oh, I gotta close my chat. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Say cheese. Great, great idea. Thank you, Sajaric, and thank you, everyone. Hope to see you again soon. Stop the
okay.
recording.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
goodbye.
Have a good